Greetings, math fans. All right, so today's topic is called circular functions. And basically, we're going to be using our calculator to find S. So we're going to do actually some calculator, we're going to do some non-calculator, because the non-calculator we've actually done already. Okay, but we're going to kind of review that a little bit, but basically we're looking for, instead of theta, which was our angle, we're going to actually look for our arc length. Okay, and again, it's relatively easy. So let's just kind of get started here. Okay, so if I'm going to tell you everything's going to be in terms of radians, first of all. Okay, so this is actually from day one. If I said sine of 3 pi over 4, hopefully you would look at this and go, you see a 4 down there and you go, oh, sine of 45 degrees, oh, it's root 2 over 2. You know, you'd sketch a little picture here, 3 pi over 4, just to see what the SIGN is, and the sign is positive for that. So it's going to be sine of 45 is a root 2 over 2, and it's also positive here, so the answer to this is root 2 over 2. Pretty easy. Okay, I can do cosine of 5 pi over 6. Okay, and again, you should see the 6 down there and go, oh, 30 degrees. Cosine of 30 is root 3 over 2. So I know my ratio is going to be root 3 over 2, but don't forget the SIGN. So 5 pi over 6 is over here, and cosine is negative there. Remember, it's based on, of course, all students take calculus or cookies, depending on if you're hungry. Okay? All right, then let's do another one here. Secant of 5 pi over 6. You should say, oh, well, secant goes with cosine. Cosine of 30 degrees, which you kind of done this already. We did this guy right over here, right? It's all the same stuff, except it's now 1 over whatever that cosine is. We've done this already. This is like really on day one. Okay, so if I said, hey, the cosine of 5 pi over 6 is negative root 3 over 2, you flip it, and your final answer is negative 2 root 3 over 3. Okay, just the reciprocal of that. It's pretty easy. Let's do tangent of 5 pi over 3. So again, 5 pi over 3 is over here, because remember this is 6 pi over 3. This is just a little review. So it's 1 less, and tangent is negative here. And it's 3 down there, and it's 60 degrees, very sad. So it's not a 3-party. So its tangent of 60 is just root 3. But this is negative root 3. Okay, and then if I said, hey, what's the cotangent of 5 pi over 3? You're going to do all the exact same work here, except it's going to be 1 over. So negative 1 over root 3, which of course is negative root 3 over 3. Okay, so that's pretty easy. Again, this is without a calculator. So let's do a problem with a calculator now. Calculator with a calculator is actually even easier. Okay, so this is with your TI, so with calculator. If I said sine of 1.03, you might want to have your calculator out while you're doing this, you know, just to kind of follow along. I have this on my note sheet already that I'm teaching it with, and so I have all the calculations done, but if you want to stop and make sure you're doing it right, that's great. I think a pretty key thing here though, guys, make sure your calculator's in radian mode. Okay, it's huge. Mode is radians. Okay, if it's in degree mode, you're going to be taking sine of 1.03 degrees, and it's going to give you a really bad answer. Okay, so how do you do this? You literally type in sine, and then it's going to give you a parenthesis. Make sure you close parenthesis. Just good habit. And you hit enter, and you get 0.857. Pretty easy. Now, let's do cosecant of 1.03. Now, you don't have a cosecant button, and we've done this before with degrees. I'm going to show you I'll show you what to do first here. It's going to be, remember, it's reciprocal. So if I said, this is from back in just before, sine of 3 pi over 4, you told me it was root 2 over 2. If I said cosecant of 3 pi over 4, you did 1 over, you found the sine of 3 pi over 4, and then you did the reciprocal of that value. So that's why it would be 2 over root 2 or just root 2. Okay? So same thing with this, math fans. It's 1 over sine of 1.03. That's important. Okay, it's a reciprocal of that. So if you do that, it's basically 1 divided by 0.857, which gives you 1.166. Okay, that's your answer. All right, now I'm going to show you what not to do. This is a really, really bad thing. If I ask you to do this, this is really bad, is sine of 1 over 1.03. This is a horrible thing to do. Boo, boo. Okay, do not do that. That's terrible, because that's like saying, hey, what's the sine of pi over 6? And, oh, okay, cosecant of pi over 6 is the sine of 6 over pi. So, guys, just like you didn't take the reciprocal of an angle, if I said sine of 30, and I said, well, what's the cosecant of 30? You don't say sine of 1/30th of a degree. That doesn't even make sense. That's dumb. Okay, you're going to say 1 over sine of 30. So this is dumb as well, because this is saying 1/6 of a pi. Okay, 1/6 of a pi. This is saying 1/pi of a 6. That doesn't even make sense. A pi of a 6? If you go to order a pie at a restaurant, and they say, well, how much of a pie you want? And you're like, oh, I'd like 1/pi of that. They'll be like, what are you, crazy? Okay. Now, if you said, I'd like 1/6 of the pie, they'd be like, oh, okay. And they cut you a 1/6 of the pie. But if you ask for 1/pi of a 6, they'd be like, well, we don't serve sixes here. You can't get a pi of it. I mean, it doesn't even make sense. Okay. So this is horrible. Don't do that. Okay. You do 1 over the sine of that. So going back to this original problem, cosecant of 1.03 is 1 divided by sine of 1.03, which then is 1.166. Okay? All right, so let's do a couple more here. Let's do cosine of 3.92. Well, you should look at this and say, oh, cosine of 3.92? Just type it right in your calculator, guys, and you get negative 0.712. Super easy. Okay? And remember, these values for cosine and sine are all between negative 1 and 1, right? That's the range for these values. Okay? So if I type in the secant of 3.92, it's 1 divided by cosine of 3.92. Okay, which is negative 1.404. Again, it's the reciprocal of that answer of 0.712. Okay, and if you guys remember this, that's between negative infinity and negative 1 union 1 to infinity, right? Because remember when you graph, like for cosine graph looks like this. And if I graph the secant graph is basically 1 divided by that. We'll learn more about the graphing, but it's basically, it's going to be out here. It's not between negative 1 and 1. It's less than negative 1 and greater than positive 1. Okay, we'll talk about that in chapter 4, the graphing chapter. It'll be very exciting. All right, and then last one here, if I said tangent of 5.17, that's going to be negative 2.031. Again, type in your calculator. And if I said the cotangent of 5.17, you're going to do 1 divided by the tangent of 5.17, which is negative 0.492. Okay? Pretty easy. Let's how about a negative value? What happens when we have a negative value? What if I said sine of negative 2.894? What do? You just type the negative in there. That's all you do. It's like super easy. Okay, and you get negative 0.245. Super easy. So if I type in the secant of negative 8.163, what do? You type in 1 divided by the cosine of that number of negative 8.163. And that gives you negative 3.288. I want to point something out here, math fans. All of these, I'm going to put this in red, big bold letter. All if I just said sine of something or cosine of something or secant of something, these all have one answer. That's huge. They all have one answer. It makes sense. If I said, what's the sine of 5 pi over 6? One answer. Sine of 10 pi over 3, one answer. Okay, they all have one answer. Okay, so now this is where I gave you S. Okay, now what we're going to do is we're going to look for S. Okay, we're going to try to find S. So let's do no calculator first. So no calc, and this is find S. So it's find the arc length. And again, we've done this already. And by the way, I'm going to put this in red here. All problems will have two sets of restrictions. Okay, just kind of saying that. That's important. So I'm going to put a couple of stars around this baby. Okay, the first set of restrictions is the SIGN. So you're going to look at the sign, the SIGN of the ratio. So sign of the ratio. And the second one is I'm going to give you something where, hey, it's between two different values. Okay, so two restrictions that you have to look at. All right, so let's start out with a nice little friendly problem. Again, this is all no calculator. So if I said sine of S is equal to 1/2, and I tell you it's between 0 and 2 pi. So two restrictions here. One is, and I'll put this in red, this is positive, and it's between 0 and 2 pi. So the 0 and 2 pi kind of didn't give a restriction, but still kind of did. We know 0 and 2 pi is the whole, all four quadrants basically. And then the positive, you know it's going to be here or here. Okay? So we're going to find a reference angle, and you guys should know that. If I said, hey, the sine of what is 1/2, you guys should say, oh, it's 30 degrees. Sine of 30 is 1/2, which of course is pi over 6. So notice I use this nice little reference angle. S prime is pi over 6. So we talked about this already in on day 1. Okay, so remember, if that's pi over 6, we have this quadrant here, which is pi over 6 then, and this quadrant here, which is pi minus pi over 6, or 5 pi over 6. So those are your two answers, pi over 6 and 5 pi over 6. That's it. You're done with that one. Okay, so let me highlight these. That one's an answer, and that one's an answer. Okay, but two restrictions. Two restrictions. So let me just highlight. So again, one restriction was that between 0 and 2 pi, and the other one was the SIGN. Okay, which was in this case was positive. Okay, so let's do another one. If I said cosecant of S equals 2, and it's between 0 and 2 pi. Okay, well, so once again, math fans, this is positive. That's a restriction, and it's between 0 and 2 pi. Now, the 0 and 2 pi is actually not really much of a restriction. It's everything, right? It's all four quadrants. Okay, so let's draw it. It's all four quadrants, so it can be anywhere on there, and it's cosecant. And cosecant is positive here and here because it goes with sine. So we need to remember. We talked about how to come up with a reference angle. I need to rewrite this as sine of S equals 1/2. Take the reciprocal of that ratio. And now this is like the last problem. Okay, we just did this one. So S prime was equal to pi over 3. Sine of 60 is 1/2. Or sorry, sine of 30 is 1/2. And so it's going to be pi over 6, right? S prime is equal to pi over 6. So our two quadrants here, 1 and 2. So this is going to be pi over 6 as an answer. And this is going to be 5 pi over 6 as the other answer. All right. Not bad? Okay, so let's do cotangent one. Okay. All right, so cotangent of S is equal to negative root 3. And this restriction I'm going to say is between pi and 2 pi. So a little bit more restrictive, right? So, again, two things that show restrictions. One is this is negative, and the other is between pi and 2 pi. So let's sketch a little picture here. Well, between pi and 2 pi is these two quadrants, and where is cotangent negative? Well, cotangent is negative in these two quadrants. So the only one where it matches up is this quadrant right here. Okay? So that means your final answer is there. So we're going to do a little bit of work. We're going to say tangent of S, because I like tangent, is the reciprocal. So it's negative 1 over that, so negative root 3 over 3. Okay, you got to figure out your reference angle. It's a 3-party, so it's 30 degrees or pi over 6. That's my reference angle, and so we come over to this quadrant, and that's 11 pi. Well, it's going to be 2 pi minus pi over 6, so it's 11 pi over 6. That's your answer to that problem. Okay? It's not bad. Okay, so let's try another one here. We'll do secant of S equals negative 1. So, and now let me give you a restriction. It's going to be between pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2. Okay? So the first thing I want to do is, you guys should kind of recognize secant of S is negative 1. If I rewrite this as cosine of S equals negative 1, which of course is the reciprocal, you guys should know this is a quadrantal. Okay? And then you're going to well, where is cosine of what is negative 1? Well, isn't it over here, and isn't it pi? So the answer is pi. Looks like an upside down smiley face. If you turn your computer over, it looks like a smiley face. Okay. But that's, so again, we have a restriction here between pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2. And of course, cosine is negative in that area, only one place. Okay, that's one of the quadrantals. All right. So again, this is kind of review from day one. So let's do with a calculator now. Okay. So let me clear this out of here. And so this is with calc. All right. Sine of S is equal to 0.215. Okay, and it's between 0 and 2 pi. So remember, we got two restrictions. One is between 0 and 2 pi. So that's all four quadrants. And then sine of S is positive. So where is it positive? Well, it's positive here and here. So what does that mean, math fans? It means there are two answers. Okay, so the first thing you're going to do is you're going to find S. So S equals inverse sine of 0.215. And I'm going to put a little S prime there because that's really what you're doing. So S prime, after you type the inverse sine of 0.215, you get 0.217. And remember, that's a radian measure. Just like it's pi over 6, but this is a radian measure, 0.217. So it's not a bad idea to store this in your calculator. I showed you guys how to store it. Hit basically that STO and store it in X. X is like the common one that you store it in. And you guys should, I'm looking at my calculator right now. Store is right above the on button. Okay, and then you hit the X button, which is next to your alpha button. So if you hit store, I'm looking at my calculator now. I have 0.217, I hit store. That gives me, so this is what it looks like in your calculator. 217, you hit store, it gives you the arrow. You push the X button and it actually shows you X, and then you hit enter. And it should, after you hit enter, it says 0.217. But now X retains 0.217. Okay? Kind of nice, because if I need it again, which I'll in this case here, kind of don't need it, but let me just show you why you might need it. Do you guys agree the first answer here, this is 0.217? It's in the first quadrant. So what did you do to find this answer? So let me highlight this one. What did you do to find this one before? Didn't you always say it's pi minus the reference angle? Well, you're going to use the pi button on your calculator, and you're going to say pi minus, so the pi button is right above the little caret button, so 2 above the division button. It is the caret button, it's right above the division. So you have to hit second up arrow, second caret, and that gives you the pi, okay? And then you're going to do that, you're going to say pi minus, and then you can hit x if you want, pi minus x. And if you do that, really pi is 3.1415926, blah, 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 right? So you're going to subtract it, and it's going to be pi minus 0.217 gives you 2.925, and that's the answer. So 2 answers to this problem, math fans. Okay, I have the 0.217, which is in my first quadrant here, and then I have 2.925, which is in my second quadrant. And that's, you get 2 answers for this problem. So sometimes you have 2 answers. Sometimes you have 1, sometimes you have 2, sometimes you might not have any. All depends. Okay, so let's do another problem here. How about tangent of S is equal to negative 1.63. And the restriction is pi over 2 to 3 pi over 2. So what you're going to do is you're going to draw your picture. Where is tangent negative? Tangent is negative in these 2 quadrants. Okay, and then it says, hey, between pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2. So that means it's between these 2 quadrants. So your final answer, math fans, is going to be in that quadrant. So once you figure out the reference angle, what are you going to do? You're going to say pi minus that reference angle. Okay? So let's put that in our calculator. Remember, to get the reference angle, you're always going to make this positive. That's important. So you're going to do inverse tangent of positive 1.63. Okay? And if you do that, you get S prime is equal to 1.021. Store that in X. Okay, and then to find out your actual answer, you're going to say pi minus X, which gives you 2.121. That's your final answer. Okay, if you didn't store that in X, and let's say X was the last thing you had, you can't say pi minus answer, right? And answer, just again, looking at my calculator, it's second negative, that negative sign. That's your answer, ANS. That's kind of a nice little button to push. Okay? Let's try another one here. How about secant of S equals negative 2.75, and it's between pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2. I'm going to put a parenthesis on that. All right, 2 restrictions, guys. The first restriction is the SIGN. It's this negative, and secant goes with cosine, and cosine is negative in this quadrant and this quadrant. Okay, and then our next restriction is this one, between pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2, which is between these 2 quadrants. So it matches up for both of them. So we actually have 2 answers for this problem. Okay, so what we're going to do is, you got to rewrite this. Please don't forget, it's cosine of S equals negative 1 over 2.75. It's really important. Got to rewrite it first before we do the problem. And then we're going to do inverse cosine of positive 1.275. Remember, you always do the positive value because that gives us our normal reference angle. And that gives us 1.199. Store in X. That's actually important now that we store in X, because you're going to say pi minus X and pi plus X. And hopefully you guys are following along, trying your calculator. Pi minus X is going to give us 1.943, and pi plus X is 4.340. Those are 2 answers. Okay? right, last problem here. We'll do cotangent of S is equal to 4.94, and it's between pi and 2 pi. Okay, let's draw a picture. Cotangent is positive in these two quadrants. And it says between pi over 2 and 3 pi over 2. That means we're in these two quadrants here. So where's our final answer? Right in that quadrant. It's in the third quadrant. Okay? So we're going to rewrite this as tangent of S equals 1 over 4.94. Okay? And then we're going to do inverse tangent of 1 over 4.94. It's positive already. And that gives us, again, our reference angle comes out to be 0.200. Okay, either store it in X or you can just do pi plus that. So I can say pi plus answer or pi plus X, which gives us 3.341. And that's your answer. That is, and think about it. Right, this is pi, this is 3.14, so it's a little bit more than that, so 3.341. Okay, so our last kind of problem that we're going to do is basically if I said, and there's some different wording here, but if I said in a unit circle, so unit circle is a circle with a radius of 1, so let's draw one, x squared plus y squared equals 1. So if I give you unit circle and I say where is the arc length S equals 21 located? When I say that, I mean what quadrant? So what quadrant? So if you guys remember, basically this is 0 and this is pi over here. But if I said this is 3.14, just let's even go 3.1, just to simplify it. And then this is pi over 2 on top here, so that's about 1.6. And then this is 2 pi over 3, so if I add 1.6 and 3.1, I'm going to get about 4.7. And this is back to 2 pi, which is about 6.3. Okay, just to get an idea. So if I said, hey, where is 21 located? You would say, well, it's 6.3 to here, and then another 6.3. So do you guys agree 6.3 times 3 is 18.9. So 18.9, and then I want 21. So do you guys agree it's a little bit more? It's another, well, here, let's do it. It's 21 minus 18.9, which is 2.1. And where's 2.1? Well, it's between 1.6 and 3.1. So that's in this quadrant. So if I told you where is 21 radians located, you would say quadrant 2. Okay? I can give you, if I told you another one, if I said a real basic one, 5 radians. Okay, that's an easy one because I don't have to do any work. It's between 4.7 and 6.3. So 5 radians is quadrant 3. Or sorry, quadrant 4. Okay? So you can basically subtract 6.3. It's like doing coterminal. It's like if I said, where is 5,000 degrees located? Ooh, that's a hot day. You would subtract 360 times whatever number. How many times 360 goes into 5,000, right? And then when you're left over, you would say, well, it's, let's say it was 120 degrees. You would say, oh, well, 120 degrees, I'm in this quadrant, so that'd be quadrant 2. All right, so that's definitely one way to do that, to figure out what quadrant. But I have an easier way for you to do this. Anybody want to see it? Raise your hand. I thought so. I see you raising your hand. So what we're going to do is I'm going to show you guys a little bit easier way to actually figure out what quadrant we're in. So let's go back to this again. S equals 21 radians. Let's just take the sine of 21. Now it's not 21 degrees, it's 21 radians. God, I put the degree symbol. No degree symbol. Boo! 21 radians. So you get 8.3 or sorry, point. I'm just going to erase the stuff that I'm making a mistake with. Okay. There we go. Okay. You get 0.837. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to write the sign here. It's positive 0.837. So let's do another one. Let's do cosine of 21 radians. If you do that, you get negative 0.548. I'm going to highlight that negative because that's important. So I'm going to put a negative there. Let's do tangent. So tangent of 21 radians. That's going to be negative 1.527. I'm going to highlight that again. So that's interesting, guys. 21 radians, the sine of that is positive, the cosine of that is negative, and the tangent of that is negative. Now, if you recall, all students take calculus. Where's sine positive? Sine's positive in these two quadrants here. Where's cosine negative? Well, cosine is negative in these two quadrants. And where is tangent negative? Tangent's negative in these two quadrants. So where does it all overlap? You guys should say, oh, Mr. Crevice, it overlaps right here in the second quadrant. Hey, look at your notes from original, right? This is quadrant 2. So the easier way to do this is, as opposed to subtracting and try to figure out coterminal and everything, why don't you just take a tangent, sine, and cosine of these values and see what the signs are? I even have a little faster trick. Notice I got positive, negative, negative. I only have to take the sine or the cosine or the sine of the tangent or the cosine of the tangent. I basically have to do 2 of these to figure out where I'm at. That's all I need. I just need 2 of them, and that would identify the quadrant. Okay? So I could, let's do another problem here. Let's do, how about 73 radians? That's pretty friendly. So I'm going to type in sine of 73. And I don't even care what the number is. All right? I'm going to get a negative value. And it doesn't matter which one you type. You can do sine, cosine, tangent, but you have to do 2 of them to restrict it. So I'm going to do now the cosine of 73 radians. Remember, it's radians. That's like several times around, multiple times around. If you do that, you also get a negative. So I know that I have to figure out where's sine negative. Well, sine's negative here and here. And where's cosine negative? Cosine is negative here and here. That means my answer is in quadrant 3. So if I did tangent of that, so if I did, just for the heck of it, tangent of 73, which I'm going to do my calculator right now. Hopefully you guys are following along. Tangent of 73 better be positive. And it is. It's actually positive 0.919. Okay? Just to kind of prove. So it doesn't matter. You just have to do 2 of them and find out that you are in quadrant 3. Okay? Kind of an easy way to figure out the quadrant without actually doing coterminal is just do sine or cosine or tangent, but you have to do 2 of them and then you are good to go. All right? So that's it, math fans, for circular functions, and hopefully you guys are good to go with that. Just be careful of your ratios and make sure you're in radian mode, and that's it. Have an outstanding day, math fans. Adios. Goodbye.